Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome into another episode of the Damn Podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network and powered by BeaverBlitz.com. I'm your host, Carter Bahns, joined as always by BeaverBlitz.com publisher Angie Machado, who got a little bit more sleep. I mean, we always open these shows talking about sleep, but that's just where we're at with these night games.
Hey, but you know what? I watched the whole game last night. I did
We'll
not fall asleep like I did the
We'll
week
take
before.
it. I was telling Angie before we got started here. Of course, we're recapping Oregon State's 24-10 win over Washington State Saturday night at Reser Stadium. That, a 6 p.m. kickoff sounds great and all, but then you do the math, you add the hour and a half it takes to get home from Corvallis, and there you go. You've got a 7:30 kick, a 4 p.m. or a 4 a.m. bedtime, and here we are again. So running on fumes. We're going to see if I can get through this thing in one piece. If I yawn, if you see me yawning on YouTube, if you're watching us live, go ahead and call me out in the chat. We're going to do our best here, but we are recapping Oregon State's big. I think it's fair to call this a big to huge win for Oregon State to get over that hump, to snap an 8-game losing streak against Washington State, which in my game story last night, I said, hey, you know what? This felt like one of the last, quote unquote, get over the hump, expel some demons type of skids to get through. Oregon State snaps an 8-game losing streak to the Cougs with a 24-10 win. Angie, let's, we're going to go through our traditional game at a glance. We'll go through the game flow, hit on some of our keys to the game, what didn't. But before we hop in, I mean, the defense probably is the story of this game, right? To hold Washington State to 10 points and to really, I feel like, thoroughly dominate Washington State on that side of the ball, right?
Absolutely. And I want to go back, though, to what you talked about being a huge win. And it is a huge win. Yet both of these teams were 4-2 coming into this game. And I really think, and we heard, people in the media talking about this. This was kind of the directional game, I feel like. So both teams are 4-2 coming in. One team's going to come out of the game 5-2. That's the Beavers. The other is 4-3. There's a big difference between 5-2 and 4-3 as you start looking ahead toward bowl games, potentially conference matchups.
I'm going to stop you right there, too. There's a big difference between those two records, but think about the conference records.
Yes.
There's a big difference between 2-2 and 1-4.
Yes,
and that's what
absolutely.
This game determined.
Absolutely. I mean, this game was monumental, and I think that's getting
1-3.
1-3, I believe. Yeah. Either way, it's monumental right now for the conference race for so many. Not only that 8-game skid against the Cougs. I mean, you kind of have that mythical Pacific Northwest title kind of in the air too. But I really think that what's getting kind of glazed over here is just the importance of that win. Now heading into Colorado, a very, very winnable game, and then a bye week before heading up to Washington. So I like the way this sets up, just like I didn't really like those USC Utah back-to-back. I thought that was a really hard, difficult stretch. Now Oregon State has that Colorado bye to really kind of catch their breath before kind of finishing out that last month of the season.
They're not going to take the Buffaloes easily, but I mean, when the opening line is set at 23.5 points, yeah, I mean, Vegas knows what's up. This is
one of the worst run defenses in the country.
Right. And an offense that's still pitiful. But, I mean, Vegas knows what's up. This is a game Oregon State should roll in. And
yeah, PM has a good point.
We're looking ahead, but, I mean, Oregon State has a chance to be bowl eligible by its bye week. I mean, talk about program trajectory. Yeah, Last year, it was all about getting to a bowl game.
Yeah.
I mean, here we are sitting after 7 games, and we're talking about the Beavs playing for bowl eligibility, in a game that should theoretically be somewhat of a layup. Or again, this is we're recapping Washington State, but it's to your point. Oregon State put itself in that position by beating the Cougs, and that's why this game is so big.
I want to point out in the comments, and maybe you can pop it up. PM says, the games against Fresno, Washington State, and Stanford are all games that this team in the past would have lost. this is that next step in the progression of the team kind of building the program. Is first they go from losing everything to starting to win it, have some close games at home, winning those games at home, having close games on the road, to now pulling out those close games on the road and at home. So this is a team that definitely is building the foundation, and they've eked out some. I mean, that Stanford game, I know we're talking Washington State again, but that Stanford game in the last seconds, or the Fresno State game, easily 2 amazing victories this year too.
That home road thing, I mean, this is kind of a question that I'm curious to ask Jonathan Smith. Obviously, teams always play better at home than they do on the road, but there's something about Oregon State that just feels like, if Oregon State plays Stanford at home, I feel like it wins by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
If this game is in Pullman, maybe Washington State pulls it out. I just feel like there's something about playing at Reser with this Oregon State team under Jonathan Smith that, I mean, there's a reason Oregon State went 6-0 at home last year. There's a reason the only game they've lost in the last 2 years at home is to a top-ranked USC team. I mean, playing in front of that fan base and in a home field environment like Reser, there's something about it that just elevates Oregon State's play. And, I was the only person on the BeaverBlitz staff that picked Washington State to win this game. I'm looking back at that and I was thinking, what am I doing? Oregon State's playing a home game. These are almost guaranteed wins at this point. And it's incredible to see because, to your point, like you said about, building the program, a couple of years ago, Washington State comes into Reser. I mean, think back to the COVID year.
Oh, well, I mean, even go back further. Yeah. Total domination. And I think when you look at good teams win their home games and then split the road games. And that gives you a really good year. Yeah. The great teams can win a few more than half on the road. This team is getting to be a good team. I don't think they're getting the respect, even within the conference. Looking at the Kook fan board before the game. I mean, nobody was really thinking this was going to be a tough game. I don't think the Pac-12 network really, all they kept talking about was Washington State's injuries and how they're missing their running backs. And okay, well, if you want to go there, Oregon State's down their quarterback and their star tight end. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, it was just kind of got old. But
and an all-conference safety.
And an all-conference safety, exactly. So, I just don't think this team's getting their due yet. They probably won't until they can potentially knock off Washington up in Seattle. But definitely a fun team right now, and I think Beaver Nation is definitely behind them.
And I think the performance and to go out and to win in this fashion where it never really felt like a game, No,
I told you before we went on the air that it felt like Oregon State was going to win by 30.
Yeah, and I think 24-10 was not entirely indicative of, I felt like Oregon State kind of won that game by more than the score would suggest. But for Oregon State to go and win in that fashion after looking. Let's call it like it is. I mean, Oregon State looked dreadful for 3 quarters at Stanford.
3.5 quarters.
Yeah, 3.5. I mean, just did not look good against Utah offensively, and I mean, I guess defensively too, giving up the 42. It felt like this team needed a get-right game, and I said, man, this Washington State game comes at a really tough time because I think this is a game that, a team that's trending downward like Oregon State kind of looks like it might be. It feels like a game it could lose. Like, this is the week Oregon State needs Colorado. This is the week Oregon State needs a bye week. Well, now you have to feel really good about where you're at, winning a tough game like that against Washington State that I personally had circled on the schedule. When we're doing our game-by-game predictions in August and we're previewing the season and we're doing opponent previews in July, I said, man, that game is going to determine which of these 2 teams takes the next step and reaches that top tier, or at least, jumps into the top third or so of the Pac-12. Oregon State was that team. Yeah. Oregon State, yeah. I mean, these are 2 4-2 teams. They had identical records, conference play, non-conference.
Very evenly matched in the statistics category.
It just felt like a statement win for Oregon State, saying, you know what, we're here. Like, we're done losing to teams that we're, quote unquote, the same as. Like, we want to be in that top tier of the conference. And while I think the elite group of USC, UCLA, Utah, Oregon is, it's hard to join that party. Oregon State's knocking on the door, but I don't know if anybody's letting them in. Win at Washington, build this long losing streak going into Oregon. Maybe you're part of that group, but we've got a game to talk about here.
Yes,
we have to dive into
We're
this.
going to wait and talk about all these what ifs for bye week podcast.
Yeah, that'll be good bye week content. But before we jump in, I just want to shout out everybody for watching us live on YouTube. Thanks for taking part of your Sunday. It's
we're almost we're over 900 subscribers on YouTube. My goal is 1,000 by the end of the season. I think we can do it.
Yeah, I think we can get to 1,000 by the end of the month. Let's make that goal.
Help
us get to 1,000 subscribers, guys. It's free. It's YouTube.
Free.
Like it's free. You'll get notified if you hit the notification bell every time I go live. You'll never miss a show. You guys have built such a great community on the damn podcast live format, and we really appreciate that because it's fun to have these interactions with you in real time. But let's dive into this thing. Let's dive into this big win for Oregon State, a 24-10 result at Reser against Washington State. We always touch on all the yardage numbers, so let's open with that. What if Angie, if I told you that Washington State outgained Oregon State, would you believe me? Like with the way Oregon State's defense played, would you believe me if I said Washington State had 368 yards and Oregon State only had 344?
You know what? That surprised me when I was doing the defensive points today, that I kind of did a double take there myself.
Yeah.
But there was a little chunk in there where Oregon State defense kind of went soft prevent mode, and Washington State was able to pick up some big chunk yards. So it didn't really add up. I mean, it didn't add up to points. They did add up some yards. I was maybe yelling at my TV a little bit, but they went back. They went back into pressure mode and kind of stopped them. But that is crazy. But the number that really pops out to me is the rushing number, Carter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that Washington State's not going to try to run the ball a ton, and it's still a pass-first team, and especially when you're playing from behind. I mean, the game script doesn't allow you to run the ball as much as you might want to. How many passing attempts did they have? 54. Yeah. So, I mean, that's telling of how little they're running the ball. But to hold Washington State to 23 yards on the ground, that's the fewest yards rushing Oregon State has allowed since playing like peak air raid Washington State back in 2012. Yeah. This is the best defensive game Oregon State has had in the rushing category in a decade.
This is the best score. Now, I didn't go back and look, but we do the defensive points, giant killer every week. This was the first time I have seen a B+ grade for the overall defense. I can't even tell you the last time because they've all been Ds and below.
I'd argue that maybe we need to recalibrate that because this felt like an A game for Oregon State's defense, right? I mean,
well, the only thing they got knocked down on was the passing yards. The
passing numbers do stand out a little bit, but even then, I think they're very empty. So let's kind of dive into that rushing number. Yeah. Washington State carried the ball 23 times for 23 yards. So, I mean, you're averaging, a yard per carry. That's going to get the job done defensively.
Yeah.
Now, Jalen Jenkins, their standout true freshman running back, carried the ball 6 times for 42 yards. So, he was productive when he touched the ball. He just didn't do it much. But the sacks, it was the sacks on Cameron Ward that brought that total down. The Beavers get into the backfield 9 times for 9 tackles for loss.
Wait, Carter, can I ask you, what was my defensive key to the game? Do you remember?
City. Sack City, baby. But the backfield presence there with 9 quarterback hurries, 9 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. I mean, Washington State was playing behind the sticks all night long.
They were 33% in third down conversions and 0 for fourth down conversions.
Yeah, and I've got the note later on about all of the turnovers on downs and punts forced, so we'll get to that. But I mean, man, just to own the point of attack in a game that we said is going to be determined in the trenches. Oregon State delivered on that.
And so then flipping the script, Oregon State rushing the ball, that O-line, we talked with Vinnick from Kook Fan. Jamie. I kept wanting to say Jeremy. I knew it was wrong. Jamie Vinnick from Kook Fan, and he kept talking about how great that front seven is for the Cougs. I watched Oregon State's O-line open up giant holes all night long. And how about Damian Martinez? You and I have been so high on him. He had the most touches in this game, 16 touches for 111 yards.
That's 6.9 yards per carry. So, basically, as productive as Jalen Jenkins on a per carry basis, He just got the ball 10 more times, and you see what happened. I mean, he crosses the century mark for the first time by an Oregon State running back, I believe, since Deshaun Fenwick did that at Fresno State back in week 2, I guess that would have been. So, you go a month without a running back racking up that kind of production, and Martinez does it after he has that breakout game against Stanford with the 2 big runs and, that the all-important touchdown run on the farm too. Feel like Oregon State has its guy at running back now. I mean, he's only carried the ball 19 times over the last 2 games, but all he's done is make things happen. And Jonathan Smith was, I'll tell you what, he was very happy that somebody brought up the fact that he got more than 3 carries last week.
Yes. That's, and I wonder if Jonathan, you mentioned this on Thursday, how they finally made him available, and that you thought maybe that was just their way of saying, watch this, I noticed Fenwick still got the start. A little frustrating. I felt nothing against Deshaun. I mean, I think he's a great guy. He has a place. It's just that production wise, I just feel that Martinez and Jam, I would have it Martinez, then Jam. Jam's kind of that change of pace runner. Mm-hmm. I think they're finally starting to see that. And part of it too is Martinez is a true freshman. Yeah. I think he just turned 18. And I think he's finally maybe getting that confidence that he belongs in this level. Not that he had questions, but it's a big learning curve to jump from high school ball to Division I. So,
Brian Miller asked in the chat, do we need to start giving more carries to certain backs, stop the committee approach?
I've been for that for like 5 games already.
And I think we saw it kind of emerge in the second half there. Jonathan Smith always said, we're going to ride the hot hand. If one guy's producing, we're going to ride with him. But at halftime, it was still very even. I think we were looking at maybe 5 for Fenwick, 4 for Griffin, 6 for Martinez, something like that. But, they really did commit to Martinez. And it's interesting to see their roles kind of emerge, because entering the year, you think of Trey Lowe as a 3rd down back. You think of Deshaun Fenwick as a 1st down guy, and then the other guys just kind of mix in. Now it feels like Martinez has the ability to be your lead back. Then you go with Griffin as a change of pace, and Deshaun Fenwick's there for short yardage. Unfortunately for him, he's got to compete with Jack Coletto for short yardage situations, but it feels like that's where Deshaun Fenwick thrives right now. Yes. And again, like you said, nothing against him, because he is a good running back. It's just, he doesn't have the breakaway potential that the other guys give you. And you want that on 1st and 2nd down.
And he really seems to get tripped up. He gets tripped up quick. So, I think I would, if I had to say anything about Martinez, it was that his vision was maybe lacking a little bit the first couple games. He's really caught on, and his vision has really improved.
Yeah, we have a comment coming in about Jack Velling.
Yes,
I have a section dedicated to him later in the rundown. So don't think that we're ignoring. We're skipping over Jack Velling leading Oregon State in receiving. We're going to get to that in just a few minutes. But the passing numbers, as Angie said, that's probably the reason Oregon State graded out as a B+ for us in our defensive metrics. 345 yards allowed to Cameron Ward. But he had a ton of
drops, though. He was only 46% completion percentage.
That's exactly it. And that's why I think, 345 yards looks great for Wazoo. But then you got to think about efficiency with these things. When that's literally the only way you're moving the ball, because you're not running it at all, and, you're taking sacks, like you can't complete 46% of your passes.
Yeah, not going to get
and some of that was due to drops. But, man, Oregon State with the past defenses and everything. I mean, they came in as one of the top teams in the country in passes defended 11 more passes, 10 breakups and a pick. You throw that in with a couple of drops, and all of a sudden you've got Cameron Ward sitting under 50%, and you're thinking,
that's not gonna fly in an air raid offense. Yes.
On the flip side, Ben Gulbranson for Oregon State again gets the start for Chance Nolan. 12 of 24 for 50%, 141 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Pretty middle of the road game from Ben.
And I'll talk about this tomorrow, and I don't know if it's going to be a he said, she said, or just a that's what she said.
Leaning towards the latter.
Okay, that's fine. But I mentioned this because I went to bed last night, and while I was happy the Beavs won, I had this feeling kind of just that the offense just continues to sputter. It just still felt like they couldn't quite get, until I sat down to write that, and I started looking at the stats, and you have to remember Washington State actually is a really good defensive team. So Ben, while it wasn't pretty, was he good enough? Yeah. I mean, he was good enough.
And Jack Coletto said after the game in the post-game press conference that with the way the offense was rolling, and sometimes this is how it works at Oregon State, a team that likes to establish the run first, sometimes you just need a game manager. And that's what Ben did. And something that, I think Tristan Gebbia did very well when he was the starter.
Well, we got spammed here on
we got bots in the chat. We got bots in the chat. Shut it down.
Wow.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and block that user. And there we go.
We had like Tinder and all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah. All right. Wow, changing
sorry
gears
here.
If
you're
listening
to this on the
I don't even know what we were talking about.
We were talking about being a game manager, and Ben was a good game manager. And especially when Washington State did a really good job of keeping Trayshawn Harrison covered and not even an option. So that was actually, I think he did even a better job to be able to read that and go to Anthony Gould or Silas Golden or Jack Velling.
Brian Miller, bots are a sign we are growing.
That's right.
Absolutely. You don't see channels with 100 subscribers get trolled like that, but no, we
Tinder hot. Wow. Okay.
.xyz. Cupid emoji. Wow, that's too good.
This is good.
All right. The one more thing we got.
This is the damn podcast version of getting water dumped on our head live.
Yeah. Another defensive number we have to highlight here is the pressure Oregon State got on the Washington State pocket. 9 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. I have the quarterback hurry number down here. 8 quarterback hurries.
I think it was 7 or 8.
So 8 quarterback hurries and 6 sacks means you're getting to Cam Ward 14 dropbacks. He threw the ball 54 times. So I mean that's like what's the number on that? 20%, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean to get that kind of pressure on a guy who's trying to run an air raid offense, you're not going to be able to move the ball against that. So much credit to Oregon State's defensive front, the outside linebackers, the edge rushers there, but also the defensive backs. I asked Katano Ladapo about this after the game. I said, you guys are down the field breaking up passes and getting into the backfield, taking the quarterback down. Like, how many things do you have to manage at one time if you're a defensive back in this system? And he said, it's all about eye placement, staying disciplined, making your reads. And man, Oregon State safeties and nickels, they do such a good job of that. It is so impressive on a weekly basis to see these guys get into the defensive backfield and to get pressure on the quarterback and make plays down the field.
So
it's just a sign of a great all-around defensive game.
Huge shout out to Jaden Grant, because I actually felt he played the best game of his Oregon State career against the Cougs.
Sorry, I was monitoring the chat. I missed what you said there, but
Jaden Grant, best game of his career.
Oh, yeah. It's up there. I mean, I haven't done the top performance or the top performers piece for BeaverBlitz yet. That's a post podcast thing. But I believe, 8 tackles, 1 sack, a pass breakup. It's up there for sure as far as just well-rounded games go for.
Well,
for
those 2 total. One was a sack, one was just a tackle, midfield tackle, but he just popped them. It was
throw
great.
This up here.
Nice,
coming from Nick. Best DB group in the country. Best in the conference. I'm very willing to say that. It's up there in the country. I mean, you had 4 or 5 all Pac-12 players come back from last year, and I think they've all done nothing but improve and improve notably.
Yeah.
You put a Trent Bray scheme in there too. I mean, it might be one of the best secondaries in the country at this point. Let's move on and do some game flow stuff. But before we do that, let's just remind everybody who's listening, who hasn't already subscribed to the BeaverBlitz video YouTube page, who hasn't already taken advantage of the VIP subscription at BeaverBlitz.com. If you haven't done that, you're missing out, because, man, as the season progresses, like our content just gets more and more fun to produce. And I think we just get more and more in depth. And, as this team just continues to rack up the wins, it's been fun to see our engagement grow as well. So we just have to thank the BeaverBlitz community for jumping on the bandwagon. with us. And, I say bandwagon kind of, lightheartedly. Oregon State fans are by no means bandwagon fans, but to join the BeaverBlitz train and to help us grow as this team continues to just get better and better. We can't thank you enough. So if you haven't already, now's the time to do so, because everybody and their mother is doing it. So follow along in the peer pressure and head to BeaverBlitz.com, because we have all the coverage you could ever ask for.
I was super surprised last night because we do a live game thread during each game. And usually home games are a little quieter just because fans are obviously in the stands.
Yeah.
Last night was crazy. It was busy. We had over 100 people in the lodge at one point, 7,500 views in that one thread. Not bad.
That's pretty good for a home game.
For a home game, yeah.
When everybody's, in the stadium and not on their phones, because the
Wi-Fi's
LTE at Reser Stadium is not terribly impressive. And I actually texted Angie after the game. I said, you know what, this Reser Stadium Wi-Fi tonight, there's just something about it. Like, I'm sorry, but nothing's getting up on the website until I get back to Sherwood, because and I'll be transparent here. My Oregon State student account from 2 years ago now actually deactivated last week. And so I lost access to the student Wi-Fi, which, man, I was upset about that, because Oregon State student Wi-Fi is some of the best Wi-Fi out there. I mean, we're getting real off topic here, but yeah. So if you were like staying up till 1, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, thinking, man, where's the post game coverage? Yeah, you can thank OSU _
well, and that's one of the
Wi-Fi.
That is one of the reasons that we actually split up on some of these games, because the Wi-Fi can be so bad that then if Carter and I are both stuck in the press box with no Wi-Fi, then none of us we can't do anything.
Exactly.
So the way it is, if I'm at home watching, doing the live game thread, at least one of us has Wi-Fi.
Angie and I do these, the team gets together on Sundays and watches film. Angie and I talk about, all right, so, how's Wi-Fi? How's engagement?
Yeah.
This is our film review. So we're taking you inside the film room right here. But, all right, that's the BeaverBlitz plug. Let's talk more football. So
let's get into it.
Things get started about as good as you could ask for Oregon State's offense. And you're thinking, well, for special teams and then the offense, you're thinking, man, this is as good of a start as we could have ever imagined against a good defensive team. Silas Bolden takes the opening kickoff 60 yards to the Washington State 40. Tyjon Lindsey hauls in a 4th down conversion to keep the drive alive. A pass to Jack Velling. Oregon State finds itself towards the goal line, and then Jack Coletto plows in for a 1-yard touchdown. And just like that, Oregon State scores on the first drive of the game, which is the first time Oregon State has done that this year, which is so surprising, because in years past, we've talked about Oregon State as, getting a hot start and making teams play from behind. That was the story of last season, I think, offensively, was all the hot starts. More of the same this year. And it's something that we hadn't really seen up to this point. Were you as impressed as I was with kind of how they got this thing rolling?
Yeah. I mean, that starting things off with the kickoff return was huge. And then, like you said, it gets down to, the conversion by Tyjon Lindsey. And that was such a monumental, and it's going to go overlooked by, when you kind of really go deep down, but Tyjon had a couple big catches on conversion. So, and then it was fun to see Jack Coletto back kind of running with it. He ran a lot with the offense.
6 carries for, I think, 11 yards off the top
But he was
of my head.
I mean, he was tight end. He was Wildcat. He was fullback. Yeah, we saw him all over, but we hadn't seen him in a couple weeks. So, everybody's liver got a little rest in the Jack Coletto drinking game, but it was all go time this week.
And Jack said after the game, actually, that was part of the game plan to get him more involved in the offense, because Washington State is a nickel-heavy team. He said there were matchups that they wanted to exploit. Curious now if teams will run less nickel. Maybe Jonathan Smith is saying, "Hey, Jack, like, what was that about? Why did you let that out there?" But I mean, great game plan.
You know what, Carter? I don't think it matters, because the Hammer,
because they can't stop him anyway.
I mean, seriously. I mean, he can't be stopped. They know he's going to run the ball, and they can't stop him.
Speaking of getting stops, Oregon State's defense set a tone early with a 3-and-out on its first drive. Rajon Wright, textbook pass breakup on 3rd down to force a punt. I mean, seriously, as far as setting tones goes, touchdown on the first drive, 3-and-out with a great defensive play on 3rd down. Like, that's about as good of a start as I could have imagined. Then on the flip side, Ben Goldbranson tosses it to Sam Lockett the third. He returns at 36 yards to Oregon State's side of the field. It was a pressured throw, okay, and this has been a trend with some of Oregon State's interceptions this year. It's a lot of them have been under pressure. The quarterback's not necessarily throwing it away; he's trying to make a play. There's something to be said for standing in there and but I think that was a quote unquote decision making interception by
Goldbranson. I do too. But you know what? It turned out not to cost the Beavers, luckily, any points. So yeah, it was ugly, and I kind of had some "oh no, here we go again" vibes. But it turned out it was not costly.
And it didn't cost them because Kyrie Fisher-Morris, Katano Ladapo combined for a third down sack.
Our bot's back.
Tinderhot XYZ is back in the chat. We're going to go ahead and block that again. Yeah. So the another 3-and-out, Oregon State with another big third down play, and that was a theme of the night. Here's my favorite stat of the night was that Washington State had 1 yard of total offense through the first quarter.
That's
just pure domination. And it's Washington State only has 2 drives, and sometimes first quarters get out to a slow start and you only see like 2 possessions. Yeah. But still,
1 yard.
For
a potent offense like the Cougars.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. Like Oregon State's defense was dominant in the first quarter. Yeah. Then the Beavers expanded their lead with a 26-yard field goal from Atticus Sappington. Could have had 6. An impressive play that will go unnoticed because it was called back. But Goldbranson showed a little bit of escapability on this play.
He did.
And then Taliesin Fuaga makes one of those, don't give up until the play is over type blocks where Goldbranson had already escaped the pocket, but he had a guy chasing him, and like 8 yards behind the line of scrimmage, Fuaga comes in and just blows the guy out of the water with an incredible block. Yeah. Goldbranson fires the ball on the run to Anthony Gould. Unfortunately, the ball hits the ground and the touchdown is overturned. Oregon State does still get points there, and you're looking at a 10-0 start at that point. Now, the second quarter it was one of special teams. That was all of the offense, and there were a handful of punts too. Dean Janikowski, no relation to the Janikowski fame of at the.
I had to look that up actually, and it's funny because the Washington State media guy actually says, under his personal, it says no relation.
Yeah, that's come Sebastian. Up a while. He's a great kicker too. But yeah, what are the odds? The name Janikowski, you're both kickers that you're not related. But he answers with a 29-yarder. But again, Oregon State keeps Washington State out of the end zone. John McCartan had a huge sack for 12 yards, a 12-yard loss. And then Jaden Grant with, just again, a huge hit to knock a pass loose. And the story of the first 3 defensive drives were just huge, timely plays. Yeah. That brings up 3rd and 22. Washington State has to settle for 3. And then the rest of the second quarter was just a bunch of, all right, 3-and-out, 5-and-out, 7-and-out. A bunch of punts. Now, Luke Loescher, we have to highlight him here. Punted the ball 5 or 6 times for Oregon State and averaged about 50 yards per punt, which
huge.
If you average 50 yards a punt for a season, you're probably having the best season by a punter in college football history. Those are incredible numbers, and something that shouldn't go unrecognized because the field position game was critical in this game. That was one of the big reasons why Washington State didn't score many points. It's because every time it got the ball, it was starting from its own 20.
Yeah, and that's another point it's gonna get glassed over with all the recaps, but another very huge part of this game.
Washington State opens the second half with a 3-and-out, and then Oregon State again adds to its lead with the catch of the game. I would say it's the catch of the season so far, but obviously that goes to Trayshawn Harrison last week. Anthony Gould high points a ball right on the goal line and falls pretty hard to the ground. He was fine. On a throw that at the time I was like, oh, Ben, what are you doing? Like, you're rolling out of the pocket. You're on your back foot. Like, how many times have we seen that turn into an interception this season?
And he threw it at like major coverage.
Yeah, I think we've seen that exact thing turn into a pick like 6 times already this season. But I mean, to his credit, put it right on the money for Gould. It's, it may have been somewhat of an ill-advised throw, but can you really say that when he threw an absolute dime and Anthony Gould made the best catch of his career?
Yeah.
It just impressive play all around. Showed off Ben Gulbranson's mobility and what we had seen from Gould in fall camp, just elite playmaking ability. 17-yard touchdown catch makes it 17-3 Beavs halfway through the third quarter. And, that was basically the margin the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Jalen Jenkins. So this was the offensive portion of the game right here.
Yeah.
Two teams scoring 2 touchdowns in the span of 4 minutes. Jalen Jenkins responded with a 9-yard receiving touchdown from Cameron Ward, a 3-minute and 41-second scoring drive from Washington State for its lone touchdown. And really the only time that I felt like Washington State had any momentum.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That was the only, and even then it didn't feel like the game was out of reach.
Yeah. Jack Coletto scores a second touchdown of the game, which was set up by Damian Martinez's 50-yard run.
That was so pretty.
So off the top of your head, was his touchdown against Stanford, was that 43 or 53 yards?
I thought it was 53.
Okay. So yeah, I was curious if this was the longest run of his career or if one of those last week had
I think he had a 53 last week.
Okay.
So
that does sound right.
While we're...
Again, that was the play that I missed as I was walking down from the press box. So, but nonetheless, again, Damian Martinez, like this is the player Angie and I saw in the spring and fall and had been hyping up. And Angie, do you want to take another victory lap? Like I'll let you take a victory lap.
No,
if you want to.
I've taken so many victory laps, but I'm just happy that what we've said is coming to fruition. And I texted you last night that it does feel good that the things we've seen, we saw Ben take off a little bit. He's not a statue as a lot of people want to make him out. And we said in August that this defense was really, really good.
And what stood out the most to us, the takeaways, right? And the play of the defensive backs. I mean, we've seen that. We saw that this week.
Yeah.
But really all season, just the ability for the defensive backs to get into passing lanes, to knock the ball down, to bring it in. We haven't seen that from an Oregon State secondary since Jordan Poyer was
here. What? I just looked. Stanford, his long was 43.
Okay.
So this would have been his longest run.
So that 50-yard run to the Washington State 4 was Damian Martinez's longest rush of his career. And man, there are so many more like that coming. Ryan Cooper Jr., interception, his second in as many weeks. So when I was watching this play, I was like, oh, shoot, like, Washington State's going to pick up a first down here. But then, oh, what a great play to jar the ball loose. And then, oh, what a great play by Cooper to catch it off the carry. I'm like,
But you know what? Oregon State actually lost 10 yards in that because that was a fourth down play.
That's true. That's very true. But you'll take the pick over the 10 yards.
Yeah.
Just, the
momentum. Yeah.
The momentum boost and the energy and the excitement is, it's so much better than, turnover on downs. All right, I guess it's our ball now. That was a fourth down attempt for Wazoo. A couple more punts, things really just slowed down. And really at that point, it's like for Oregon State, like all you really want is time to wind down. Like, sure, you want to put some more insurance points on the board, but you have a double-digit lead. You're in the fourth quarter. Like, let's just wind.
You just don't want to do anything stupid.
If we have to punt, like, so be it. Then Washington State has 90 yards to go because Luke Loescher's otherworldly. Washington State did turn it over on downs a couple of times in the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
One decision that I want your opinion on, and if I had more time in the post-game press conference, if it hadn't already gone longer than any other one, I would have asked about this decision. So Oregon State's got a 4th and short. Kind of, I wouldn't say deep into Washington State territory, but like midway through it. And, Jack Coletto's been doing Jack Coletto things all night long. If you get the first down there, like the game's probably over. You probably just kind of run the clock out. But if you kick the field goal and you make it, that's a 3-score game and the game's over. So like, I guess the question there is, what are you more comfortable with? Like Jack Coletto picking up a couple of yards, you holding onto the ball and running the clock out, or Atticus Sappington hitting a 35-yard field goal, which of course he did not.
I know
to extend the lead.
So everything, if you go by the book, it would be to kick the field goal. You kick the field goal, you get the points. It's a 3-score game at that point. You also build maybe some confidence with a backup kicker that you might need. That being said, like Eric and I were debating this. We were debating it in the Lodge chat during the game. Eric thought that was the right call. I actually think I probably would have gone with Jack because I just think you weren't stopping him. And pick up that first down, run the clock out, potentially score a touchdown. Maybe I was getting greedy. Like I said, if you played it by the book, it would say to go for the field goal. Jonathan Smith was playing the way you should. But I'm used to him being a little more of a gambler.
I didn't question it at the moment because I think if I'm making the call there, I'm sending the field goal unit on. I know these are college kickers. You got your backup. I don't know. Did you notice if Dylan Black was long snapping?
He was.
Okay. So, you've got your starting.
Oh, he's back. The bot's back.
All
Tender hot.
Block. So, you've got your backup kicker and whatnot, but like you should feel pretty good about kicking a 35-yarder, right? So I was okay with it. Obviously they missed it. It didn't cost them at all. I just felt like, you're not risking anything by going for it, but you're also not like you don't have to, in that situation, especially when Washington State has only scored 10 points. Like they're going to have to more than double their score at that point. So I was fine with it. And, I know that some fans had been questioning it. So I was just kind of curious what your thoughts were.
But that was the right call.
And then Cam Ward scrambles on Washington State's final possession for what I think 12 yards on like 4th and 19 or something and runs out of bounds. And that's the ball game. That just finishing touches. I think that's a fitting way for this game to end. Washington State's behind the sticks. It's got a 4th and 19. Ward is trying to make something happen because he's under pressure and he got great coverage downfield. Doesn't get enough. I thought that was very fitting, just, the way Oregon State's defense had played.
Well, speaking of Oregon State's defense, mobile quarterbacks have been a little bit or quarterbacks that can move have been an Achilles heel for this team for years.
Yeah.
They had Cam Ward backed up a lot this game.
All right, let's talk about the good and the bad. There's substantially more good from this game, right? Yes. I mean, in most wins there are, but this one in particular, Jonathan Smith called it a great team win. And really credit to Nick Daschel for asking this question because, you pick up on some of the nuances of press conferences throughout the season. And, a lot of times Jonathan Smith will come in and he'll say, proud of the guys, blah, 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 so-and-so, but so much to clean up in all three phases. We didn't like this call or we need to execute this play better. There was none of that. Like Jonathan Smith was just like, he was smiling. He was happy. Like the players were too. Like it just felt like a team that was very happy with the way it won that game. And Smith said, it was our best defensive performance of the season. We didn't really have much to clean up. I thought we got great execution in all three phases. Like even the quarterback play, like the numbers don't look great, but Ben actually played better than that might suggest. I think they were really happy about it.
Yeah, I do too.
I think they were just really thrilled about the way they played this game.
Yeah. Because they dominated, it was, it felt a little like that USC game, except they came
out with the win. So I guess question for you is this the best performance you've seen in all three phases?
Well, I guess it would be all three phases. I still think they played the best at USC. But those 4 interceptions were
and I throw out the Montana State game because
that doesn't count.
Like, I guess, it was impressive because Oregon State put up 60 something points and we didn't see that coming, but it's an FCS opponent. Yeah, so I think you kind of, if you're talking about superlatives, that one doesn't kind of gets tossed.
Yeah. I think probably top to bottom, I guess all three phases, this would be the best performance.
Yeah. And really, I mean, the only thing in special teams that you want to clean up is a missed field goal. And again, those things happen. So
they happen, just like interceptions happen. I mentioned last night, interceptions are going to happen if you're throwing the ball, but you just don't want 4 in one game.
Yeah. All right. I promised we'd talk about Jack Velling. So the leading rusher, we've touched on Damian Martinez and the performance he had and the breakout he is going through right now. But Jack Velling at tight end. So Luke Musgrave goes down at the tight end position. Your star tight end, your leading receiver goes down 2 weeks into the season, and you're like, great. All right. We have a really young tight end group, but there's a lot of depth, and we feel like a lot of talent because Oregon State has recruited it well. Who's going to be the guy that steps up? Well, How about a true freshman? 2 weeks in a row making a couple of catches. Jack Velling 4 for 63 yards this week is he doubled the next best reception total, and I think more than doubled the yardage total there. How impressed were you with what he was able to do after the catch? Because I feel like that's what stood out to me. Like, you don't normally see tight ends like weave through guys and make them miss, but he looked like a receiver out there after the catch.
He did. And, he's part of that is, he hasn't had time to put on maybe as much weight as a normal tight end would. But he was recruited to be more that receiver tight end mold, and definitely, take a bow, Jack Velling. And I noticed on the leading rusher and the leading receiver were both true freshmen.
It's impressive stuff.
The future looks bright,
If you can get a quarterback in there that can do a little bit more than just manage the game, and maybe I'm not going to write off Aiden Childs getting a chance as a true freshman next year.
No.
I really won't. But with Velling, I kind of forgot the point I was going to make here, but it's just the fact that he comes in as a true freshman, and I think it's telling. Jonathan Smith said when he introduced all of these guys, Velling is the kind of guy who can come in and can get a shot to contribute right away. And, sometimes you take that and you say, all right, like, he's just kind of hyping him up as a good guy. Like, they really like this kid. But, like, in camp, he was running with the ones and twos as a
he was freshman. A kid, though. It was quiet, but he had a lot of interest coming at him late in the process. And he stuck with his commitment. But, he was one that the big guys were coming after.
All right, here's the point I was going to make. I forgot. So think back to when Luke Musgrave came in and we're like, all right, this guy just looks, he looks like a physical specimen. Like, he has all the tools to be an elite tight end. It took him a couple of years to get to that point. And unfortunately, we may never really see a full season of it, which I think it just sucks. But, like, obviously we want Luke Musgrave to go do big things in the NFL. I think he has a chance to do. But what Jack Velling is doing 7 games in his collegiate career is what I think you and I thought Luke Musgrave could do.
Yes, absolutely. No, exactly. Because it took Luke a few years to get he dropped the ball. He, had some issues there. And this is, I think, like you said, this is what we expected Luke Musgrave to look like. So
which is why I think I'm so high on what Velling has
done.
Because
so think about what he can do.
Yeah, because we touted Luke Musgrave as this, this true freshman who could be a phenom for Oregon State, and it just didn't come to fruition right away. But we didn't have the same necessarily hype about Velling. You and I were both we both really liked him as a prospect out of high school. But for him to do right away what we said a potentially elite tight end could do, there's a reason I tweeted during the game, Oregon State might have an elite tight end in the making in Jack Velling, because he's doing stuff that we expected from a guy who is now an elite tight end in Luke Musgrave 6 games into his career. We talked about the running back rotation and how it made a little bit more sense as the game progressed. Do you think, do you think something clicked there? Do you think the coaches maybe are thinking all right, Damian Martinez, Jam Griffin, the carries at the end of the game suggest that they are recognizing these are the guys.
Okay, so this is my conspiracy tinfoil hat here. So you didn't see this because this is what you get when you kind of watch it on TV. Toward the end of the second quarter, Jonathan Smith was taking notes. Mm-hmm. I don't know what he was writing down, but I'm wondering if he maybe was dude, feed the ball to Martinez. I don't know.
Good point.
I don't know.
So time of possession is something that we'd never really talk about.
Yeah.
It's one of those take it with a grain of salt stats. But I thought it was very, I think the discrepancy in time of possession deserves note here, because I don't know if I've ever seen it this lopsided. Yeah, Oregon State possessed the ball for 35 minutes and 44 seconds. Washington State 25 minutes and 5 seconds. Oregon State had the ball for 10 more minutes than Washington State. This is a 60-minute game.
Yeah, but in an air raid offense, that's not maybe necessarily a big indicator because they can score so quickly. The bigger, Oregon State was just able to stop them 3, 4 and out, 5 and outs. I think that was the key there.
And I think that's kind of the point I was going to try to set up with that, is that it's indicative of great play in all 3 phases, because your special team sets up long fields. So you know that Washington State's drives are probably going to sputter out at some point. Like only elite defenses can consistently score when they have to march 85 yards down the field.
Yeah.
Defense forced 6 punts. There were 4 turnovers on downs. Great execution defensively. When those drives stall out, and like Washington State's not going to be able to hold on to the possession and score without big plays. 3 and outs as well. There's a split in the media guide and game notes that talks about Oregon State's record when it controls time of possession, and I don't usually include it in our matchup previews, and I don't even have it pulled up, but it's a stat that I'm going to look at after this because I think Oregon State is significantly better when it controls time of possession. And obviously, these things are, it's correlation, not causation and whatnot. But
that typically means you're running the ball with success if you're going to be able to control the clock.
Yeah. Another area that stood out to me, 2 penalties for 10 yards and only 1 turnover after a week where you had 3 or 4 unsportsmanlikes and
Okay, but that crew, Mark Duddy and crew, did the Utah USC game, which ended in a complete cluster.
That just might not be the best crew. Is that putting it lightly?
But that's hard on a team because there's no consistency. You have one team, one referee squad that's going to flag every sneeze, and then you have another one that's going to let you actually play and get physical. And I'd rather let them play, but it makes it tough. It makes it tough to coach. It makes it tough to play when you don't know exactly what's going to get called.
But do you think it's also indicative of Oregon State's morale and kind of where the locker room's at too, where like they are playing more disciplined and they're not having the uncharacteristic like after the whistle penalties? Whereas, you look at the first 3 quarters against Washington or Stanford, and I said, man, it looks like a team that doesn't even want to be here. It's doing weird stuff in the penalty area. But then Oregon State comes out, executes, like is fired up on every play, and what do you know? It's playing clean football too. Like I think some of that is, I think a lot of it's mental.
Yeah,
actually.
It totally is mental.
So,
I see Connor.
After a win like Stanford, like obviously it's going to lift your spirits.
Exactly. I just saw Connor Johnson, totally off topic, asking if Synthetic Sports will do any more Beav videos, and they were actually at the game this week for us filming. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah,
I'll throw a little shout out here on the screen if you're watching live on YouTube as we continue on. Clutch catches stood out to me. We already kind of talked about what Tyjon Lindsey did, but I thought the Gould touchdown fits there as well. And then defensively, the thing that I was most impressed with, and again, I feel like I'm rehashing this, is what the defensive backs did in all 3 levels of the defense. I can't highlight that enough. Even in a 14-point win, some stuff that didn't go according to plan. I think quarterback play, even with the coaches and players saying Ben actually kind of thrived in his role in this game and took what the defense was giving him. I still think that quarterback play is holding the offense back.
100%. 100%.
Anything that stood out to you as something that you want to see cleaned up going into next week?
Run the ball more, I guess. I thought it was pretty, besides quarterback play, and that's maybe not necessarily all on Ben. This is going to sound nitpicky, but I thought his handoff seemed a little shaky. My 14-year-old who loves football was watching the game, and he actually thought Oregon State was trying a little slow mesh because you'd watch.
Learned something from last week.
Yeah. He's like watching the handoffs and he's like, are we doing some slow mesh here? I don't know. I don't know if Ben's just being slow or if he is actually, if they're going to try to incorporate a little RPO slow mesh in there.
Yeah, I was going to say that can just that can be telling of, all right, this plays an RPO.
Yeah.
He's reading to see if he wants to throw this thing. I would like to see some more RPO in the Oregon State offense if Chance Nolan comes back and is the starter, because I think, I know they've done this a little bit, but I just think, his ability to pull it gives you, your RPO becomes a triple option at that point where he can either hand it off, he can keep it, or he can throw it. So, something to watch for maybe down the road after playing Stanford and seeing it firsthand.
Yes.
Fumbles. They didn't cost Oregon State, but Oregon State did cough the ball twice. I think one went out of bounds and one they recovered, if I'm not mistaken.
Oregon State recovered. I
You
think
know,
Jack
you're not
Coletto
losing
actually
them.
recovered it.
Yeah, like you're not losing them, but you got to hold on to the ball.
Yeah.
A couple of drop passes too, but nothing catastrophic there.
No.
No injuries. No injuries came out of this one. We didn't see anybody return other than Dylan Black, I don't believe, at long snapper.
Yeah.
Still waiting on Joe Golden on the defensive line. Be nice to have him back, even though I think the defensive line's playing really well without him, but he was one of the better players out there on that defensive front.
He's day-to-day from what I hear, so it's just a nagging injury that can give him problems.
Everett Hayes still with that groin injury. That's always going to be tough for kickers, still, day-to-day, week-to-week, but no real big updates on that front after this game, which is good. You never want to hear like, okay, we've got all this injury news, like guys coming back, guys leaving. Like Oregon State by and large still has been like relatively lucky, I think, as far as injuries go. They've been at positions where I don't think that it's like inherently costing them.
Yes.
All right, we have to revisit our keys to the game before we get out of here. I mean, you already got your Sac City drop in. Maybe, you know what? Maybe we might need a soundbite for that. We might need a Sac City drop.
Sac City.
Offensively, I said keep it positive, no negative plays, get the morale back. This is a multifaceted key, a play on words. All of that, I felt like Oregon State did.
Resounding. And I believe I was run the ball. And they did that too.
And they did. They crossed the 200-yard mark for the second time this season.
And then defensively, your key was to contain the pocket, which.
Well, I want to touch more on the offensive one.
Okay.
Last week against Stanford, Oregon State gave up I think 8 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. So uncharacteristic. And, I think some of that was on Ben Gulbranson, not necessarily comfortable on the road, first start, you name it. But the offensive line against, as you said earlier, a Washington State defense that has probably a top 3. No, I was getting them mixed up. Washington State does have the best front 7 in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
They lead the conference in tackles for loss, sacks, or at least close to it. Top 10 in the country. Oregon State allowed 3 tackles for loss, 1 sack. Like, that's pretty good against a really good defense.
Yeah.
4.3 yards per carry isn't great, but again, the volume was there. So Oregon State ran for 200 yards and a couple of touchdowns. Again, I just don't think there's really much we can take away that was negative.
No, it was. They kept it positive, Carter, just how you wanted it.
Okay, so as we can transition to the defenses. You were trying before I interrupted.
Yes, no, it's good. So contain the pocket. I mean, they did.
Yeah.
I mean, 8 quarterback hurry, 6 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. If I was to ask you who had the better front 7 pass rush, who would you have said? If I asked you that before the game.
Yeah, you would guess that it's by far Oregon State.
Yeah.
Here's one for you. I'm going to list all of the guys who are listed in the sack category. And, Oregon State had 6 sacks, but some of these were like combined. So going down the line, and this is in order of total tackles. This is how I sorted this. Jaden Grant, Kyrie Fisher-Morris, Katano Ladapo, John McCartan, James Rawls, Siona Lolohea, Isaac Hodgins, Corey Stover. I just listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys who were credited with a sack.
Okay.
8 different players.
8 different players.
Defensive lineman, linebacker,
yes, I was going to say,
defensive back.
But it's split across the board.
Yeah, it's
and for all those people that have been complaining about the D line, which I was in the past year, but they're still complaining about the D line. 4 of those guys are D linemen.
Rawls, Lolohea, Hodgins,
and Stover.
Stover technically outside linebacker, but yeah.
Yeah, but and McCartan. I mean, so I get confused because now Stover and McCartan both say that their coach is Leggy.
Yeah, I'm curious if some of the edge rushers are coached by Leggy and not Trent Bray. Trent Bray obviously was the inside linebackers coach even when Tim Tibesar was here. So I think, there's only so much, like the guy only has so much bandwidth as a defensive coordinator. So like, let's narrow it down. I think he's honing in on the inside guys while the outside guys are maybe working with the defensive line.
So I mean, just in a shout out to Omar Spates, because he's not credited there, but he actually almost had a full sack.
Mm-hmm.
Great play by Ward to kind of escape it, and Rawls got credited with the actual bringing him down.
Yeah.
Or
just great stuff.
Lolohea. Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah. Just great stuff from the Oregon State defense, all three levels. Best defensive performance you have seen since ... question mark.
Since USC.
Oh, since 2 weeks ago?
Oh, you're talking like in general. Okay. God,
well, okay. No, that's a fair question. Did you think Oregon State played better defensively against USC or Washington State?
Well, this is a tough one because I think the offense at USC is like
better than Washington State.
So
that's fair.
I actually think I thought they played better against USC.
All right.
But those two, the USC and Washington State, it's the best defense I've seen an Oregon State team play probably since 2012.
Okay, so yeah, that's where I was trying to get us to.
Sorry.
That's where I was trying to get us to.
Like,
yeah, by and large, Oregon State is playing the best defense this season.
Yes.
That it has played in probably a decade. And
absolutely.
You and I saw a lot of that in camp.
Yeah.
But I think we still were a little skeptical of how it might show up on game day. Like, okay, we know they're going to be better, but like how much? Well, a lot, actually.
Yeah. Okay, Connor Johnson, I want to address this because you say I have to disagree. Still a lot of left on the table for our D-line. I agree. And you know, I mean, I have been super critical of this D-line, and a lot of that's not going to be changed until recruiting gets better. But what they're doing and how they're performing compared to where they have been for, by and large, the same group of guys is like 1,000% better.
Yeah. There were a couple of plays where I'm like, all right, so is anybody ever going to get to Cam Ward?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, is he going to stand back there for a minute before he throws the ball?
They were only rushing 3 most of the time.
But for every play where I was like, okay, like, where is everyone? There were 3 or 4 where I was like, man, like Cam Ward is just under duress right now. Like everybody's on him. Yeah, just all around it. Such a good win for Oregon State. Not like program defining by any means, but it just feels like, man, they got that last monkey off their back. Like this team will beat anybody on any given day, especially if it's at home. It just feels like a big win for Oregon State. Now sitting at 5-2 through 7 weeks, going into a game that you feel like it shouldn't be close against Colorado, and then you get your bye week, like this team's reloading, recharging, and getting ready for the stretch run. And it feels like a team that's about to win 8 or 9 games.
Yeah. Or 10, like I predicted.
Or 10. Hey, it's still mathematically possible. Pac-12 championship, still mathematically possible.
That's a little bit of a long shot, but
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yes.
And on that note, we'll leave you with a little bit of optimism on this episode here. We're going to be back on Thursday to preview Oregon State's game against Colorado, the last one before Oregon State takes a week off, in quotes. You know, it's a bye week. They're still doing stuff. This will be our last week of regularly scheduled content until November. Actually, we're getting down there. This season is moving along. But until then, yeah, we'll have our normal game week stuff while Oregon State prepares for the Buffaloes. You can follow her on Twitter at Angie Machado 1. You can follow me at Carter Bahns. We'll be back on Thursday for another episode of the Damn Podcast.